Hello, welcome to the Stock Valuations Excel demo video where I'm going to go over some of the stock valuation mathematics and formulas from Chapter 13, Stock Valuation. So using the dividend valuation models, the first one is the constant growth model. So this is the formula up here in yellow. So plugging this formula in, I'm going to say D1 divided by K minus G, and we get a stock price of 102. So let's format this to be currency. So once again, take the dividend divided by K minus G, and we get the stock price. So let's center these, and I'm just going to drag this formula over. Okay, so now what if you're given D0 but you're not given D1? So to calculate D1, so D0 is the dividend right now, D1 is next year's dividend. So we're just going to take D0 and we're going to multiply by 1 plus the growth rate. So now we've calculated, so this is basically an 8% raise in the dividend. So now we can calculate P using the original formula up here. We're going to say D1 divided by K minus G. And use my format painter. Move this over. Okay. Now a zero growth model is one of the easier models for the dividend discounting models. We have our dividend here in D0, and it's a constant, it's a zero growth, so the dividend doesn't change. So simply take the dividend in D0 divided by the required rate of return, or K. And I'll pull that over. Finally, the PE ratio model. So here, if we have the earnings per share growth, last year's earnings per share, expected PE ratio for next year, we can first calculate the estimated earnings per share by taking last year's earnings per share and multiplying it by 1 plus the growth rate. So this would be next year's estimated earnings per share. Let me just format these cells. Okay. So again, that would be last year's earnings per share multiplied by 1 plus the growth rate. And I'll just pull it over. Let me just fix the formatting here. Okay, so now to calculate the stock price, we can use this formula up here, which is going to be the estimated earnings per share times the estimated PE multiple. Okay, so let's review the capital asset pricing model. So these formulas up here are dependent on, these stock valuation formulas are dependent on having a dividend. The PE ratio model does not need a dividend because we're using earnings per share growth and next year's expected PE ratio. But if we wanted to calculate K, so in these formulas we have K, which is the required rate of return, we could use the capital asset pricing model, and this is what's going to equal K. So this is, I just put these abbreviations in to make it easier to understand what we're calculating. So we would take the risk-free rate, add that to beta multiplied by the market return minus the risk-free rate. Now I listed the risk-free rate twice, but it's the same number, and I've just listed it twice because it comes into the formula twice. And we calculate the required rate of return. You can pull it across. So given this level of beta and this level of market return and risk-free rate, this is the required rate of return. sometimes known as a symbol K. So this stands for required rate of return, risk-free rate, beta, market return, and risk-free rate. So they're listed out here. Okay, let's move into, this is spreadsheet 13.1. So what we're looking at here is we have inputs for beta, the market premium, risk-free, K for equity, and the growth. So then we have the years listed here from 2017 to 2032. So this is the value of the forecasted annual dividends. This is the transition period for slowing dividends, and this is the constant growth period. So here we have a mix. So we have the dividends here. There's no, this is the forecast. Here's the transitional period with slowing dividend growth, and this would be the growth percentage here. This is G, and then we have, what we do is we can calculate the terminal value. So here, to calculate the terminal value, we're going to do E17, which is the ending dividend in year 2032. I'm going to multiply that by 1 plus F17, the growth rate, and divide that by B5, which is the required rate of return, or K, minus F17, which is the growth rate. So that's basically that capital, that's the dividend discount model. Okay, now over here we're adding together E17, the term value, plus E17, the last year's dividend, plus the termination value, and we can calculate the investor's cash flow at the end of the year. So we're looking for, here are the cash flows. So for each of these cash flows, we can see that this dividend is growing from this growth rate. So we're using these growth rates to grow the dividend. So here are the cash flows from each of the dividends, and then the terminal period cash flow. So now we're going to use the net present value function for this list to calculate the net present value of the term. And here are the calculations of the net present value if you were to use that formula. So B5 would be, this would be the rate, and then H2 to H17 would be the cash flows. So it would give a present value of this amount. And let me double check that over here. Actually, I'll put it down over here. So I'm going to insert the function net present value and put in the rate, which is K, which is the required rate of return. And I'm going to select the values and then hit OK. And I see I get the same result as what they have listed here. Okay, so that's how you could use net present value and the dividend discount models to calculate the net present value of a stock paying dividends and the terminal value at the end of the period. Okay, so let's go to spreadsheet 13.2. So in 13.2, we have, let's just review this. We have our inputs. So here are from 2017 to 2021. We have our PE, capital spending, long-term debt, number of outstanding shares, earnings per share, working capital. And then for our cash flow calculations, we have our profits, interest, change in working capital, depreciation, and capital spending. So if you look here, we have the actual values. And then here, we're modifying the values by G3 minus C3 divided by 4. So you can see that we're using the same value to estimate this PE multiple. Okay, and these are all calculations using these formulas in here for the tax rate. So you can see the tax rate here to come the long-term debt. So what's important is how do you calculate the free cash flow? So the cash flow FF and the cash flow, the free cash FF and the free cash FE. So we're going to, if you look at the formula up here, we can do the trace precedence. Oops. All right. Okay. So do the trace precedence. You can see here that we are adding together. We are adding D11 minus D13 minus D15 plus D14 plus D12. That's how we calculate this. Now for this one, if I click trace precedence, we see we're calculating, these variables are going into calculating this cash flow. And this trace precedence is a good way to show where the values are coming from. So we do that for the 4 years. And I'm going to go and freeze the top row so I always see the years. Okay. Then we can calculate the terminal value for these two using the formula shown here. And then we have the discount rate calculations here for beta, the unlevered beta, terminal growth, tax rate, debt, risk-free rate, and the market premium. So then we could calculate, using these variables, we could calculate moving through each of the years, we can calculate each year's adjusted factors from this list here using the formulas. And the formulas are listed out here to calculate. And then we can do the present values of the cash flows and the terminal values, and then find the sums of these to calculate the intrinsic value, the equity value, and the intrinsic value per share. And what's like I was showing you before, if we use on the formulas, if you use these trace, you can see where these values, what values we're using in the formula, as well as the formula itself. So let's get a good way to kind of see how these formulas are being calculated using this information. So these are over here, the descriptions of the formulas, and then you can see how the formulas are actually going to be deployed in each of the calculations. So this is a good key to look over and get some of these valuation ideas from the chapter. And what's nice about this again is it's going to lay out all of the inputs plus how they're going to be calculated. So you might want to poke around the spreadsheet, look at these calculations, and refer back to the chapter, so that way you have not just the description of what these formulas mean and how to calculate them, you also see the example of how they're calculated in Excel. Okay, thank you for your time in the stock valuation chapter. I hope you found this useful, and remember that you can find this file on the Canvas. Thank you. Take care.